So Andy's running a panel session tonight. We've got, so Andy's from the Major Projects Association. He's a big sponsor of the community. He really believes in project data analytics, visionary man. So a big thanks to Andy, and I'll let Andy introduce the panel and over to him. So he's going to be running the questions tonight, and I'm going to be heckling from the sidelines. So over to you, Andy, and a big thanks to the panel for sharing your time with us. We really do appreciate it. So looking forward to the insights. So over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Martin, and good evening, panelists. So what I'd like to do, perhaps we just start off with a quick sort of round robin from our virtual room for each of you to introduce yourself. So we have Katherine, Allen, Eleanor, Graham and Joe. So perhaps we do it in that order. So Katherine, just a little bit about yourself, a very quick pen picture of who you are and where you're from.
Hi Andy, thank you. Evening everyone. So I'm Katherine. I'm head of the project delivery function for Defence, which means that we're trying to improve the way in which we deliver all of our projects, all of our portfolio. So from our smallest projects to our biggest projects at sort of £40 billion plus. So we look at things like skills and training development. We look at assurance, so checking in our projects, and latest, we've been looking with support from Martin and my colleagues on the call at data and what we can do to really be much better at the way in which we use data. So we've got a lot of it in Defence, as you'd expect, but perhaps our kind of overall approach to that is quite immature. So that's the latest thing we're looking at.
Great, thank you, Katherine. I'm sure we're going to come on to a question about sort of maturity at some point this evening. So great, thank you very much. So Alan, same question to you. You could introduce yourself and where you're from.
Good evening, everyone. So Alan Perkins, I'm head of program for complex infrastructure, which is one of the 3 programs within National Highways Major Projects Division. So we look after some of the big complex projects like the A14 and Lower Thames Crossing and the to-be Stonehenge Tunnel.
Great, thank you, Alan. And Eleanor, same questions to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Eleanor Williams. I'm part of Katherine's wonderful team at the Ministry of Defence, and I lead on activities around learning from experience and communications. And data is such an important part of organisational learning, and that's really the sort of strategic lens that I come at it from, thinking about how we can leverage, the economy of scale that we've got in Defence, in the sense of the amount of big projects we have, how substantial they are in terms of their size and the length of time that they run for, and how we can take all that information and use that to make better decisions, learning from past errors, learning from our successes as well. So thanks for having me.
Great. So I was going to ask a question about what does it mean to you, but I think you've just captured that really neatly. So that's good. So we'll move on to a second question in a moment. So Graham, you should get the gist now. So who are you and where you're from?
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everybody. Graham Castle. I'm the head of PMO for the Integrated Waste Management Programme at the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. I suppose, what does this all mean and where are we coming from with this? I've got like a unique challenge in the public sector, I suppose, in that we're bringing multiple businesses together to manage nuclear waste, and in that establishing an enterprise-wide kind of PMO function, and that gives us a golden opportunity to really change the landscape of how these things are set up. It's not often that comes along. Typically in these roles, you kind of inherit something, you develop it, but we get to really start with a greenfield site. So it's a really exciting time for us, and we're looking forward to really leveraging the power of what we can do here.
Great, thank you, Graham. And Joe, last but not least, you'd like to introduce yourself and where you're from?
Thanks, Andy, and good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. I don't have the best broadband, I'm afraid. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, grand. All right. So Joe Jolly, I'm at the Environment Agency, Deputy Director at the Environment Agency, and I lead our team now called Bespoke projects, and that team is really in recognition of the importance of understanding bespoke and emerging themes as well. So particularly aspects around the importance of data and analytics, and in the culture we lead, and how we need to deliver for the future. And I think something that I was listening to my co-panel and hearing maybe what uniquely they bring. And I think the part that I uniquely bring is the boldness and courage of our chair and chief exec. And I'm sure many will have heard Emma Howard-Boyd in the news just recently saying around the nature and climate emergencies that it's time to adapt or die. And I think that's a really... Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I think we missed the last 2 seconds of we had to say there, but I think we understood the sentiment from your chair. So what brings you all together is that you all work in government or in the public sector, and we want to sort of understand, what data analytics means to to project professionals across the government sector. So that's really my first question, really, in terms of what does it mean to government and public sector to be able to use data analytics on your projects. So who would like to come in on that? Perhaps Graham, do you want to come in? See, you've quickly taken your your microphone off mute.
More than happy to, and I suppose just answering from the context of data and the environment that we live in first, before we go specifically into kind of project and programs. You know, I'm a massive football fan, and if you look at the way football's developed, who would have thought 5 or 6 years ago that the data and analytics departments at football clubs would be some of the most powerful kind of functions that they have? You know, you hear guys down the pub, old guys down the pub, been going to the match for years talking about this, and you start to get a flavour for how important data is to us in our daily lives. I always use the analogy, I'm doing it now, my phone's going off because it's telling me it's 10 minutes till I pick my son up, and it's telling me where to go, and it's just collecting the data of what I do out of habit. So, if you think about that in terms of the context of day-to-day life, and that's everybody, that's not just me, that's all of us. You bring that to projects and programs, you start to think, well, we're not utilising this enough. We have been delivering projects and programs for a long time, and we have, a plethora of information across all sectors. And typically, it's fair to say that there's 50% of the time, or whatever the statistic is, where it's not gone so well, and we should be learning lessons from that and utilising that data to almost help us predict, well, we're in that situation again, what could go wrong, and what, therefore can we do? And I suppose for me, I look at the uniqueness of the challenge I face. Big thing is connecting it together. So what the big tech companies, Apple, Amazon, all of those types of organisations are good at is it's not just one point of data. So it's not just risk management. It's risk management with your schedule, with your costs, with the kind of other stakeholder aspects of what you're trying to do, and bringing that all together to give you insight. And I think that's the power of what project data analytics should bring, and we should be leveraging. And I say should because I don't think we're anywhere near touching the surface. I think I've seen statements and I've seen a future say, we're in the middle of a digital revolution. And it's fair to say that projects are somewhat behind in that, and I know that they're all the task force to try and move that on.
Yeah, I mean, you're very right there, Graham, that sort of data analytics sort of pervades our everyday life in terms of things that we do, through our smartphones and TVs and other sort of routine tasks. And indeed, we're all using data analytics on our projects already, but I would say that that's in general management activities and things that have come from a functional route rather than through the project management route. Got a question for Alan, because Graham gave a couple of examples there about the way that football's using data analytics for either sort of buying or scouting players, or with their development, or even when they decide to get rid of some of their players and move them on to create space for new players coming in. And some of that, we try to apply that to our project world, can sound a little bit sci-fi and experimental. But I know, Alan, you mentioned a couple of the projects for national highways that there's a lot going on already. So perhaps just worthwhile giving us an example of where project data analytics is actually being used already.
Yeah, sure. And the first example for me is on our A14 project. It's a £1.5 billion project that spent the last 5 years in the construction phase, and to deliver that, there was a joint venture of 4 different construction companies, 2 different design companies, and Highways England or National Highways as the client. And it's having that single source of the truth from a data perspective. I'm absolutely convinced help us to deliver the project open for traffic early and within the budget. And I guess the real example for me is during our peak period on the A14, we were spending £2 million a day on construction activity. And it was really important to us to know how successful we were yesterday and what do we need to do differently tomorrow. So we got to a stage where we could see the data against what we planned to do yesterday. What do we actually do? Drilled down into trades, whether that's drainage or blacktop, and then make decisions to say, this section of the job is ahead of the curve. We'll move 2 gangs of resources from section A to section B to help them keep up with it. So it's that real-time use of the data to make decisions on a day-to-day project delivery perspective.
And Alan, that sort of example you provided there, that's not just within your own. It's not just within a single enterprise. That you described that that's across a number of layers in a supply chain. So you've demonstrated there it's possible to apply data analytics in a multi-organizational context. Yeah,
and we went on a data maturity journey across the sort of first few years where at the beginning everybody's saying, well, this is my data and this is my view of the world, and as a management team, we spent more time discussing whose data was right rather than delivering the project. And once we got to that sort of realization that the only way we would all succeed is to have that common single source of the truth from a data perspective, it really turned around the sort of delivery mindset to the outcome focus rather than the individual company's focus.
Yeah, and I guess it's a gift that all of you have in terms of being in sort of government or public sector organisations, that you're mostly the client on these projects, so you can specify some of these requirements when you engage with your supply chain.
Yeah, and for us, we didn't write this stuff in at the contract at the beginning because we didn't know it 5 years ago. It's been a learning journey, and we're definitely now starting to specify some of that stuff contractually. But it's about the willingness of all the different companies to see what success means, and that success for all of us is on time, on budget, and it's trying to lift people from their individual views of what does success look like to what's good for the project.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So, Katherine and Eleanor, sometimes I try to get my head around, an entity, if I can call it that, as big as the MOD, where you've got, the different sort of frontline commands, and you've got the different sort of equipment organisations and logistics organisations and the estate side of things. So how do you even go about thinking about data analytics on an organisation of your sort of scale?
So maybe I'll set out some of the problems, and Eleanor can talk about some of the things she's actually doing to sort it out. So, I think Alan's point is really crucial, because what defence doesn't lack is data, but the question is that data usable? So Alan gave some really powerful examples of, the project manager taking that data, looking at it and using it in a meaningful way. I mean, just earlier I had an example of where we had put in a contract for a load of data around earned value, but actually it wasn't being used. So that's an example of sort of paying for some data that then isn't actually being used by the project manager. So sort of what's the point? And I think the ultimate question really from our sort of executive level in defence is, what is it you want me to do with this data? So they will get, as you might expect, sort of trying to take something as big as defence, where, you know, just our top sort of 50 projects are worth over 200 billion, and there's a lot more than 50 projects. You know, how do you condense that into something that's meaningful for the executive committee? And the feedback from them is, you know, please no more of these PowerPoint slides with sort of size 6 font, because we don't really understand what it is that you're telling us, and we don't understand what it is that you'd like us to do with this. So we're looking at it in multiple layers. So there's, what does the individual project need to make meaningful decisions at the right stage of the project before something sort of falls off the cliff? And obviously the opportunity there is meaningful data analytics can tell you before you even know something's wrong. But all the way through to an entire defence-wide level, are we kind of investing in the right place? And can we intervene much earlier rather than waiting for something to start sort of flashing red? So that's really the challenge that's been set to us, which is, can we start to present this data in a way that is useful and helps people take better decisions? But Eleanor, you might want to talk about kind of, we're still very early stages, as the other panel members know, but a bit about kind of where we're thinking of just starting to look at this problem, because you're not careful, it could entirely drown you.
Yeah, it's definitely the scale that creates the complexity for us in defence, in the sense that you have very specific organizations with specific ways of doing things, specific systems, and a specific level of kind of autonomy within their own areas as well. But obviously our key decision makers want to take advantage of the full depth of defence data, you know, from an enterprise standpoint, to be able to make really clear decisions. And as Katherine said, it's about moving away from any kind of reporting that involves type 6 font on slide, and actually starting to shift more into a dynamic, live, active reporting state, where our data is kind of, you're able to step in and get a clear picture at any point in time about what's happening in the department. Obviously, with a challenge like this, you need to take quite an innovative approach, and also expect that you won't know everything. And so that's really the way we're looking at this, is, you know, what existing areas of expertise do we have in defence, working with colleagues in other professions like economics, like cost analysis, bringing in some of their ideas, and then also thinking what exists outside of the department right now. You know, what analytics options are there in industry and private sector that are able to cope with data sets in this way? You know, what kind of approaches can we look at? And then off the basis of looking at all of these different approaches, you know, what do we think is really gonna land us with some real benefit for our decision makers? So it's quite, you know, open perspective in the way that we do it, but it's a socio-technical challenge as well. You know, there's a really strong system side, but there's also a really strong human side to it. And that's where, you know, my role in terms of learning from experience really comes into play. And it's about understanding people's motivations, people's strengths, and you know, and sort of how we work as teams as well. How do we use the systems to support the way that we team? So I hope that set out some of our different areas.
That's really useful, Ellen, and it sort of brings up that question about, you know, really how do you get started in this, and how do you go about delivering, you know, or having a new capability around, you know, data analytics, but being applied to that project context. So I'm going to open this one up to anyone who'd like to come in. So, you know, how do you get started? You know, what you know, what can you do to start getting that data analytics capability in your projects? And then you did talk about there, sort of looking outside of the project realm to see what's going on elsewhere for insights, and also perhaps just to spotlight what can be done. But who would like to come in terms of what you're doing to get yourselves going? Because we all seem to be fairly early in this journey in some respect.
I can provide another thought to the group to maybe to prompt that conversation more. We've had this conversation that there's a huge amount of work that's done in data analytics generally, but there is a real area for movement in terms of project data analytics. And it's great to come together as a community this evening on that point, because there's a real potential, and I'd love people's perspectives on this in terms of modern portfolio management as a tool that we can bring to these large data sets. So thinking about enterprise use of data, but really applying our expertise as a project delivery profession, portfolio management standpoint, and how we can start to kind of cohere the data from that standpoint.
So, Graham, look like you're ready to come in, and then I'll bring Joe in.
I'll come in on this one. And I think that there's been a number of points raised by the panel already in terms of how you get going. I suppose to share kind of what we're doing, in my experience, this is the first thing is to recognise you can't do it all at once. You know, and I think Alan made a great point there. You know, 5 years ago, you didn't know what you do now. You know, and think how fast this stuff moves. Think about how fast technology moves and all the new options. You know, you see things that are going on at the Hack and places like that, and you think of the innovation that's out there. You can not possibly set up a 3-year plan and hope to be at the end of the journey by that, because it'll all moved on. What you can do is put the fundamentals in place. I think, you know, there is a strong kind of requirement there to think about what I would call the boring stuff, but I know some people really love it. You know, so this is kind of your data structure and flows and all that really important kind of foundation. You know, it's like if my brother's a builder and he would talk to me about building houses, the foundations, it's always the worst part, getting out of the ground, you know, really boring, really hard work. But that's where I think we are at the moment, and that's what we need to focus on. And then Eleanor's quite right. You know, what I'm doing is not just looking at data analytics on its own as a thing, because then I'm falling into the same trap as what I was suggesting earlier, where you're looking at everything in isolation. You've got to look at it in the context of what you're trying to deliver. You know, and I'm trying to put together an enterprise-wide PMO. You know, I don't want that PMO to be the same as everything that's gone before. It will be to be the next generation. You know, the thing that is different and sets the kind of bar for what we do going forward. And to do that, you've got to, I think, put yourself in, and Alan made this point earlier, put yourself in the shoes of the people that are going to be using this analytics rather than the people who are going to produce it. Right, I bet we've all fell into the trap of we need to talk about costs because costs are important, or whatever the subject is. What we haven't sat ourselves in the chairs, we're an executive. What do we need to know, and how are we going to consume it, and how much time have we got? And I think that goes right through the kinds of program management, organisational structure, if you like. And you start thinking, you know, how can I help delivery rather than how can I produce a fancy dashboard? You start thinking about challenges like that, then you're starting to hit the mark, I think. Because I go back to the tech companies, don't sit there and think, you know, what adverts do I need to produce? They think, what I need to target to sell the most stuff to earn the money because they can, you know.
Yeah, and that's right, Graham. And that's one of the things that I took from the Project Hack 11, which is where there's a a problem to solve, then the application of the various tools that were used for data analytics became much easier, rather than saying how can we have data analytics on our project. So that sort of problem-based approach first, I think is a really useful way of getting engagement, and also showing what's possible to the various different stakeholder groups or user groups, if you want. Joe, I think you wanted to come in there, and one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning, your job title or your role is around bespoke projects, and one of the characteristics of things that are where data analytics has been very well applied outside of the projects world are those things that are highly repeatable and that's what sort of the data analysts and data scientists are focused on. You're right to the other end of the spectrum there, aren't you? You've got a portfolio of bespoke projects, so in terms of convincing people that it's still it's even more of the case that data analytics should be applied on your projects, rather than everyone's unique, so therefore we can't learn anything.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. And again, I'll just check. I'm so sorry, my broadband's not working so
well
well
on
this. Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Yeah, I get that on the one hand, but then I think very often people feel that every sector is unique or every project's unique in some way, but actually, there are immense similarities across every single project, and I think a lot of what I'm hearing, we've mentioned about time, we've mentioned about how do you start, we've mentioned about what's success. Is it about being on time and on budget? I question all of those things, actually, because we don't have time. We know we don't have time. We know we've got 4 years for greenhouse gas emissions to peak, and that's the role of all of us, and it's the role of every single project we deliver to look at every single opportunity to drive sustainability in all its forms to its absolute maximum, and where we're really thinking about the outcomes of a project rather than the outputs, not just what we're here to build or deliver, but what the outcomes are from the project as a whole. And my view on that is I think we need to fundamentally shift our mind about how we do this. I don't think it particularly, I totally agree with Graham about the need to have that foundation, the need to get our data in a good, repeatable, recognisable, common format of, that absolutely, I really, really endorse that. But the other thing we're doing at the Environment Agency, as are others, but we're just starting boldly, doing our best. We've sent 4 people so far on the Project Data Analytics Apprenticeship. We put 2 challenges into the hackathon, and now we're going to work those up into tools that can be used more broadly, and we're going to open source them. So let's just get stuff out there. Let's just start using it. And particularly this cohort on the panel here, how do we join up? How do we join up as government clients, collective government clients? Because the challenges we're facing are immense. For the Environment Agency, I know we're going to always be challenged by budgets, even though the budgets are good. It's not going to fund everything we want to do, and certainly not across some of the digital ambition. But we're all trying to do the same thing here. So how do we join up? How do we drive that change together? Because we can. I don't think there's anything stopping us to pull our efforts together to tackle a nature and climate emergency through everything we do. And data analytics and sharing data has a phenomenal role to play here.
Yeah, and as you say, Joe, the emergency, the urgency that's needed, and through that sustainability, climate repair lens, means that we can't deliver the projects in the same way at pace and expect different results unless we try things in a different way. So it is the very time to try these different approaches to inform, give us those decisions and insights about how to deliver our projects quicker, but also better as well. Or as you say, with that focus on the outcomes. So you made a comment there, Joe, that as a group of clients across the public sector, across government, that you can work together and you can sort of share your experiences and pull some of your ideas. If I now if I was sat here wearing a hat as a supplier to government, what should I be doing? What would you say to organisations that work with you through the various tiers of the supply chain? And Joe, you can come in first, but I'll open it up to everyone.
Yeah, well, again, our delivery partners are doing all this. We work with some global leading delivery partners, Arup, Atkins, Jacobs, Kia, many fantastic large organisations who are already doing this. ahead of us in many ways. And what a question is, why then are we not sharing more of this? What is it? Perhaps what's our role as a client? Because I think it always has to start with us. And you mentioned earlier about, we're in that important role as a client. We fundamentally are. And we need to take that privilege, if you like, very seriously. What environment do we create as a client so that our delivery partners can be at their very best and feel that they can bring us their very best innovation, and that we will absolutely create that environment for it to prosper? And at the moment, I don't think we're getting that right, but I'd really love to hear the panel's views on that.
Good. So who would like to come in next then, from following up on Joe's comment there? Katherine?
So Joe, what you haven't built on, you might want to come back to this, is some of the work you've done on your supply chain and kind of creating that sort of positive collaborative culture. Because I think, to Joe's point, just building on what she's said, where I've seen it work is where there's kind of really positive personal relationships, which is back to Eleanor's point about this is a people and a data problem. So where I've seen data not work with the supplier and the client is where there's been a lot of animosity around the contract. And therefore what's happening is the supplier is reporting one version of the truth and then concealing the other version of the truth. Although these things always find a way through the gaps, usually in quite an embarrassing way when someone hasn't redacted the right bit of the report. But of course, it's our responsibility in government as the clients to set that environment. So I do think there is something about, yes, we have to look after taxpayer value for money, but also much more emotionally mature relationships with our suppliers. And where you've got that, and one of the examples I might give, which Eleanor's quite close to as well, is our Clyde infrastructure programme. So a lot of the infrastructure work we're doing up at the naval base in Scotland, and where there's really mature, long-standing relationships. And okay, every project has challenges on time, cost, and quality. But if you do have those mature relationships where the teams are working well, then you're more likely to be able to get access to the data that you need, and then have meaningful, honest conversations about it, because you're not scared of being tripped up. And that works on both sides. So I think we are moving away from a very outdated kind of combative commercial approach. But where that does still exist, it does drive all the wrong results in terms of access to information, and therefore what it is you get in terms of outcomes from the project.
Thank you, Katherine. Alan or Graham? Alan, you can come in.
Yeah, I think just to build, my learning has been is also that being consistent as a client. One of the frequent complaints I got is, what I was asking for in the complex infrastructure program, the same supplier working for smart motorways program or a regional investment program was being asked for different things. So we've done a huge piece of work within major projects called Digital by Default, which is really about what is it we want to be as a client. Where are we? Where can we set the data standards and the direction so that those suppliers know that they can invest in something and they can use it on every project with us, rather than every project having a different set of requirements. And I think the other thing that I've learned is really the innovation that comes from both parties, both us and the supply chain. And it's how do we create an environment where we take the best of the best. We typically had this view that we know best, or the supply chain knows best, and actually neither of us can solve this on our own. We're really doing some great work with Skanska at the minute about how do we leverage some of their developments with some of the stuff we've done, and it's the combination of our resources and their resources trying to solve common problems.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So you one of the things you're sort of talking about in terms of the data with your supply chain, and Alan in particular, you just mentioned there about across the sort of the different portfolios is that between you and your supply chain, you're generating a lot of project data. Some of it may end up sitting with you, some of it may end up sat with your supply chain, and some of it could get lost. It doesn't sit anywhere. So how do we go about making sure that that sort of hard fought experience that we've battled through to gain just doesn't get lost or ends up in silos?
I think it's being really clear that this is the project's data. It's not National Highways data or any of our suppliers' data. It's the project's data, and we create project-specific common data environments where all of our suppliers and ourselves we put all the data in one place. As I said earlier, take the A14 for example. £1.5 billion project. Probably 2/3 of that was supply chain cost, but actually 1/3 of that was Highways England's costs. So none of us have the power to solve the overall without putting all the data together, and so that's what we've done. We've created project-specific common data environments that everybody can access.
So that's something could be replicated across other major projects, where there's a public sector, client. How do we solve the challenge of good data? I mean, I think that's something, Katherine, you mentioned right at your beginning, saying you've got lots of data, but making sure you've got good data is a challenge on top of that. Alan, were there some work that you did with your common data environment around data quality too?
Yeah, I think there's a huge piece of work we've done around what's the data dictionary and what's the data model, and being clear that whilst we probably, if you think of data as a pyramid, most projects, the first four layers are probably common things we all want to report on, but then you get into particularly some of the big projects that I've led on. You don't need. I need a level of detail down the data chain that perhaps for a smaller project's not relevant. So it's having that data pyramid defined so that you agree what's common and what's actually project specific. And I think the huge thing that we learned on the A14 and some of our other projects, buy-in from the leadership team. When we first started producing these reports and putting them up in front of management, and the owners of the data were, oh, that's not the right data. Have a look at this spreadsheet. This tells you the real picture. And it's that real leadership behaviour about no, the data is what's coming out of the tools and what's coming out of the report set. If it's wrong, go and get it fixed in the source system. Don't manipulate it offline and bring me a spreadsheet. And you really need that leadership behaviour to say, don't let people pull the wool over your eyes by manipulating it. This is source system data, and if it's wrong, it's your data. Go and fix it.
Yeah, often it's a bit of an alarm bell for me when I do lots of project reviews and so on, and I've often sat in on project board reviews and the like. And whenever there's a discussion about data quality, it always prompts a thought to go and follow up on that, because it's perhaps masking other issues elsewhere. If you can take up a bit of a management meeting about talking about data quality rather than the impact of what the data's saying.
And I've learned that the first time you produce a new dashboard or whatever topic it's on, you'll spend the first couple of months everybody be arguing about the data is wrong, and you just got to get through that. You've got to get it out.
Yes.
You've got to produce it, get it out there, get it used, and then you can correct the data. Otherwise, if you start on just correcting the data, you'll be on it forever.
Yeah, and I guess the correlation of that is if you wait till you have beautifully clean data before you start doing analytics, you'll never get started, because you'll go through that cycle of debating it time and time again. Yeah, and then it looked like you wanted to come in at one point. Then did I pick up your non-verbal clues correctly?
Yes, yeah, no, it's just listening to Alan, it sort of prompted a few thoughts there around things that we've talked about in defense around information boundaries and how we can move, how can we move forward as an organization, recognizing our strengths, commands, delivery agents, head office, our supplier base, and then thinking about what those information boundaries mean between each of those organizations, which kind of links to this point around, I think it really comes down to how we operate, and ingraining data and principles around data management within our operating models. So for defense, it's really interesting in terms of our programs can run, 12 years longer. Like that's terabytes of data that you're looking at capturing. But in saying that, it kind of goes beyond our classic understanding of what a program sort of starts and a program ends. It's about thinking about that value chain from strategy through to in-service. So to use like an example, like the future shipbuilding strategy initiated, we create a series of programs to deliver against the policy choices within that strategy, and then follow that through. And then ultimately that gives us assets and capabilities that then go into service. And thinking about that, that value chain almost, and we can come up with similar examples, similar case studies with other colleagues on the call, but thinking, okay, what's our operating model that sits across that, and how can we embed data principles that are really going to serve us for the next 10, 20 years in the best way possible in the way that we do that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, Eleanor, that you talked about that. You're collecting that data, it can end up being terabytes of data, or more. And just a few years ago, that would have meant, either something that would take a long time to do any meaningful analysis on, or being really expensive. Whereas actually the whole point of the opportunities that we have now is our understanding of data, and all the different models and tools that are available is much greater, but also the cost of processing it has rapidly reduced. So things that we would have only dreamed about just a few years ago are on our phones or easily available to us through our enterprise licenses today. So Alan, just want to follow up on the example you provided with that the common data environment. That's very project specific, and when the project finishes, there'll be some activities to make sure that it's not lost. Today we heard a talk at the Major Projects Association seminar from Grant Finley, who's the chair of the Construction Data Trust that's just been established. So is there a model at some point where something like a common data environment at the end of a project could go into an equivalent data trust, because obviously it's beyond construction, there's other things going on there, and how do we perhaps then join those up across government so that you can each learn from each other's projects in a sort of an open way?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think where we are from a national highways perspective, it was around taking our learning from the A14 and applying it across the other projects in my area. We're now taking that learning and trying to apply it to all the major projects. So it's probably 150 projects now. I think we're just starting to realise the power of sharing with our colleagues on this call. I think we've been on our own journey of trying to get our own act together, but we're now our eyes are open, I think, to the possibilities of what next. For me, I've spent some time effectively archiving all our A14 data. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I know there's actually some value in it when we close down the project next year. That's going to be useful to other people. So I think, I guess we're on the start of that journey, Andy. I think it's an area we need to get into, and it's just part of the ongoing maturity of looking at data in projects.
Yeah, and it's a bit like you do the analogy with medicine. There's a huge amounts of data collected, through medical practices and also with the pharmaceutical companies. But if we just take something like statins, for example, through repeated A versus B type testing, we do know that someone probably of my age and profile, is likely to have a benefit. We don't actually know why, but we just know that certain dosages at certain frequencies at a certain stage in your life will generally extend your life. And we need to get there, don't we, with projects where perhaps if we've got so many of them, we don't necessarily know why an action at this point in the project life cycle, the true understanding of what the effect is, but we do know that it's more likely to deliver a project success. And I think we're way off that, but we shouldn't fear of collecting project data, because until we got it, we won't know what those A versus B type scenarios could be.
And I think the other bit for us in National Highways is the point Eleanor made. It's about using that data for the asset life cycle. We're still in a stage of, I've just spent 5 years building the A14 digitally, and we're in a case of, well, we're handing over health and safety files as a green folder that somebody sticks on a shelf for our operational colleagues. So we've still got a way to go from an end-to-end asset life cycle. But yeah, definitely there are lots of things we can improve on.
Yeah, great. So Joe, looked like you wanted to come in there. So whilst you're turning your microphone on and get started, I'll give those listening in a few minutes warning that I'm ready to start taking questions from the audience, so to speak. So Joe, you first, and then hopefully we'll get some questions warming up in a minute.
Thanks, Andy. I was reflecting on the conversation, which is very, very impressive in the rigour and the scale and the progress that Alan and others describe. And I think it's phenomenal and really leading the field. But I also wanted to add, I suppose, to that so for anybody on the call now, again, it's that concept of just starting. So again, a big plug for our 2 apps that we developed at the hackathon, but they were in their essence, they're very simple, but the point of them is to start generating data. So one is around how we optimize projects through the lens of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and benefit and record benefits realization in the same tool. We're going to open source this, so everyone on this call could use that on their projects. They could just start. And the same with the app around what are the bottlenecks. So what's holding us up? And I think we stole this concept from the A14 around just what's getting in your way right now. These many, many things that just, get in your way, slow things down. And if we could start to get visibility and trends on that, how fantastic. So I suppose I'm also advocating that almost like bottom up, almost starting from scratch. And there's so much power in that. And we can all just do it, and that's phenomenal.
Yeah, just to build on that, Joe. I'm in Bristol today. I was at an A303 project meeting earlier today, and one of the guys from my team that's been on the project data analytics apprenticeship came in and said, "Here's how I've done something to improve our day-to-day document management process." I'm going, yes. Yeah, here's a real life example of somebody who's got some confidence to go and do something for himself now. And I think it's absolutely, for me, about that bottom-up journey. One of the things we've done differently now is typically our apprentices were either project management apprentices or civil engineering apprentices. Well, actually, I started recruiting digital apprentices now, because that's the skill set we need in the future.
And you can teach them projects later, so get that core technical foundation in first. Yeah, that's really interesting. We've got a question here from Keith, which is, and I think perhaps Graham, I'll direct it to you, so it gives you a few seconds to think about it while I'm reading out the question. So do you think that the sort of government.gov.uk should try to standardise data as they have done with BIM?
So yeah, I caught this question earlier as the guys were talking, and I think what I'd say is if you think about what Alan and Joe have both said, right, and I think that we're at the start of this journey in terms of, Alan was saying, that standardising data in one program area then didn't manifest itself in others, and that's just in National Highways. Imagine if we did that across all of us. Imagine if we got that right across us all. And this is where Joe's thinking big is, I think, really powerful, you know, and we don't have to tackle that individually. You know, I don't have to do it first. You know, I can do one part of it, Eleanor can do another part, Alan can do another part, and Joe can do another part, and all of a sudden we're getting there together much quicker than we could ever do on our own. And I think this is one of the most important points. You know, Joe's mentioned open source a number of times now, and I think what we're open to, and this goes back to the supply chain point earlier, what we need to do more is collaborate between us to make progress collectively much quicker. You know, I said earlier, we're way behind the curve in terms of the way that our external environment's moving in projects and programs. So the only way we will catch up is to collaborate. And I think, you know, standardizing data, whatever that means, you know, we need to do something to get on that journey in order to really leverage what we can from all of this. And I think it's such a massive opportunity. It's on us to try and grab hold of that and move that forward. You know, it'd be a shame to waste it.
Yeah, and I think the door is open there, isn't it, in terms of the latest BIM or the updated BIM mandate now does include project data. I think it's sort of perhaps incumbent on us to work out what that project data really means. But obviously there's now an opportunity to not just collect the product data, as I call it, but the data around the process used to create the product, which is how we get quicker, better projects as well. Okay, have we got any more questions? I'm just having a look. So here's a so what will project delivery look like in 5 years from now? There we go, crystal ball time. So I guess there's a lot of future thinking going on in MOD. So I'm going to pick on you first, Katherine.
Well, I think we've already sort of started to answer that question here. So we as a group have talked about kind of moving away from the traditional project controls where someone's got a spreadsheet and sort of, you know, spends a lot of time updating that spreadsheet. There's something about moving the sort of skill set that we need, moving away from kind of administrative skills, which I think at the moment still sort of hold a lot of projects together in terms of the day-to-day running, to much more sort of data analytic skill sets and digital skill sets. So creating tools and then using them. But then I think the other thing that we need to continue to focus on is that kind of really mature leadership and emotional intelligence. And I think from our project leaders, we really need them to create the environment where people can flag where they see issues happening. Because one of the things that worries me is where, you know, a project team kind of feels that something's not quite right. So this might not be sort of hard data coming out of an online system, just a feeling that there's something that's not quite right, things aren't looking right. And those leaders need to be ready to listen to that and then get underneath the data, where talk to people and work out what's going wrong. And I think where we see projects going really catastrophically wrong, it's because those warning signs haven't been listened to. So you might get some of those through your reporting, but you need that really sensitive emotional intelligence to pick up when you're just starting to feel little tinglings across the team that things don't feel quite right. So I think you'll always need both. You want the data, but you need the kind of emotional maturity of a leader who can create that environment where, you know, as we just have an example, you know, one of your more junior members of the team can feel that they can go in and make something better, or flag there's just something that's not quite right here. So I'd like to see more emphasis both on the data side and on the sort of emotional intelligence side.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because it's easy to fall into the trap that data analytics would perhaps lead us to be spending more time staring at our screens and trying to get insight, but actually the rapid availability of insights means that we can go back to what I will call, you know, almost old school project management, of sort of project management by walking around, you know, and talking to people and picking up those sentiments and those feelings from the project team. So hopefully it will free us from our Gantt charts and other tools and get us, you know, being a bit more social with our colleagues. Yeah. So Graham, same question to you. What do you think 5 years looks like, given that you're setting out a blueprint as well? So perhaps you've written this down even.
I'll just build on the point that Katherine's made really. So think of a world where we haven't got a monthly report because we've got an app on our phone and it's giving us notifications. I don't have to sit there and sit through a 4-hour program review because I'm getting notified all the time. I'm connected to it. And I think that it's that type of world that we've got to envisage. We've got to envisage, as you've just said, we've got to get off staring at individual components of a project and start getting it all connected. Martin and the team showed me the graph database techniques that they use, and you start to see the power that can then create in terms of connected data strands, and you start to think, wow, this could be really useful if you can glean the insight in a consumable way. And then I think, to Catherine's point in terms of like leadership behaviours and that, it's absolutely critical that a generation of leaders come through over the next 20 to 30 years completely embedded with this kind of data approach. And we've got to be the ones who bring that generation to the fore. We've got to develop our people in a way that facilitates that, and we've got to set that environment for that to happen. And we are talking about like we're on the tipping point of kind of the way we've done project management and program management and portfolio management for the last 20, 30, 40 years. It's not drastically changed, has it? And we're about to change it. And I think that's the point we're at, and we've got to recognise that and lead the way through it.
Yeah, and signpost that the jobs will be different, but ideally more rewarding and removing away much of that routine stuff that few of us like doing. So Alan, the same question to you. So I think Graham painted a picture there of being able to make decisions about things that are coming up. So is this the equivalent of when I'm heading down the M6 and I can see the sign saying M6 toll clear, the other route busy, I can choose my route and go down a different path? Is that what we're going to get to?
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. It's having data at our fingertips that we can easily assimilate and make decisions. I think as people have said, typically in all the projects we're all involved in, that there are multiple tiers of the supply chain involved in delivering it. And today we can get, as Graham said, an app, and the guy on the field can say, actually, I'm stuck. I haven't got any material delivery today, or I haven't got access to a certain set of instructions, and we can react and fix those things in real time, as opposed to finding out at the end of the month that the guys have sat there for 24 hours because they didn't have any the right materials or stuff. So I think it's about how do we use the power of data on our smartphones to get the old-fashioned equivalent of walking around the project and seeing what's going on. And then the other aspect for me is the one around learning. We've captured so much data now, we can start to look at what's happened in the past and what does it tell her about the future, and do we get dips in productivity on a Friday afternoon, or actually the day after an England football match because everybody's been out the night before bit worse for wear that day. We can see those things happening and we can work our way around it. So for me, that it's the sort of real-time data from the field, but also learning from history.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Alan. And Joe, 5 years from now, I should imagine you'll be saying we're going to be recognised as the project generation that addressed the climate crisis and the nature emergency, but we're perhaps turning our attention onto other things now. What was your vision for 5 years from now?
Well, yeah, massive question, isn't it? 5 years from now, so the leaked IPCC report that's due to be published early next year is leaked, but the leaked information said that greenhouse gas emissions have to peak within the next 4 years. So 5 years from now, this is happening on our watch now, us in our jobs. If we haven't done it, we've failed. That's our challenge. And 5 years from now, I'd love it that sustainability isn't something that we add on, that we have to keep reminding ourselves about, that it's what we think and it's what we do and it's what we're all here to do. It will happen. It will happen. I was reflecting about the flu, the global coronavirus pandemic. We all had a flu pandemic on our risk registers, didn't we? It was very high impact, low likelihood. But we knew it would happen one day. Didn't know if it would be in our lifetimes. And we weren't very prepared for it. And yet everyone had it on their risk register. With the nature and climate emergency, we know this is happening. We've got a lead time. We know how it's going to impact us, and it's happening now. And still we're not responding. Still we're not reacting quickly enough. And we can do this. And it's going to impact us far beyond sooner than the water lapping at our doors. It'll knock out food supply. It'll knock out medical supply. Then we'll start reacting. But why don't we do it now? Why don't we do it now? So in 5 years' time, I'd love it that we value different things. We value the team culture, as Katherine said, that's what we measure, that's what we value. That we're really looking at every single decision we make around sustainability, and that we're creating an environment for humans to be at their absolute creative best. Therefore, stripping out waste, maximising productivity, like you said, Andy, taking away all the mundane activities and also the things we're just hopeless at. We know we're no good at learning lessons. We know we're no good at risk management. But if we share our data through construction data trusts and get machines to look at that data, that it will transform productivity, it will transform driving out waste, and it will transform how we tackle a nature and climate emergency. And if we haven't done it in 5 years, and if we're not up for doing it in the next 5 years, then I would question whether we're in the right job.
Yeah, and we're all in a role of making projects better. Obviously that's with the end outcome of whatever the project's purpose is too. So I just want to go back onto something that came up right at the beginning, which I think relates to this, and then I'll move on to a question from Jonathan, one of your colleagues, Joe. But Eleanor, you mentioned about portfolio benefits from data analytics earlier, and I think Alan mentioned as well about that. Our projects to-do list is far greater than our resources and capacity to do it. So there's an opportunity not just in terms of how well we deliver individual projects, but to use data analytics to shape and inform our portfolio too. And you mentioned that sort of in your sort of opening remarks. Is that something that you're actively looking at, or is it just an extension of where you've already started?
I think it's a really important part of the way that we think about project management in defence. And Katherine's going to be far better placed to talk about how functional leadership really can play such a strong role in this particular sense. But it's kind of a nice segue actually off the last question there, because as the pace of change of technologies, threats, operations accelerates, development timelines, operational lifespans of military technology, it's going to shrink considerably. So, the scale of the way that we deliver our programs is going to change quite substantially, I would say, over the coming years. And when I think about what it looks like in 5 years, that's where my mind is at. In defence, we have a really interesting mix. So we've got, elements of defence that have historically focused on long life platforms, large life cycle costs. You're really looking at things around reliability in the long term. But then you've also got, a really strong element around experimentation, exploiting new technologies for military advantage. How do you create a meaningful portfolio approach that can capture, a really diverse, complex sort of set of projects and programs in that sense from a data standpoint? It's interesting because those two groups, they've kind of got unique incentives, priorities, and kind of cultures as well. So that's kind of coming back to that human element. I think that's really the strength of us as project managers, that we really actually do solve the problems. We don't just see, this is the strategy, this is the policy, okay, actually tangibly, how can we make that land? What does that look like at the end of it all? And it's using a portfolio approach that ultimately gets us there.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to understand, portfolio alignment, portfolio fit, and other aspects around affordability and sequencing and so on. They're not easy things to do.
You don't know how high that's going to her. Really.
Yep. We got some external chatter coming on. Okay, I've got a question. I mentioned I was going to come on to Jonathan, and then after that, I think we'll do a bit of wrapping up. So, question from Jonathan: what are your thoughts with regards to skills and capabilities? Do these sit at project delivery level? Is it going to be distributed and sort of each project has some data analytics capability themselves, or is it going to be a separate team? So, assuming Jonathan means a centralized team. And Alan, you've already chipped in with an answer on the chat window. I see that your stance is that capabilities need to sit as embedded project capability, not centralized. Did you want to sort of expand on that comment?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of lenses to look through that. My view and my experience is the good idea. Yeah, things that are causing problems to projects are known by the people working on the project. And if we can equip them with the skill set to solve their own problems, that for me, is harnessing the power of multiple teams to do that. But I think there is a layer on top of that that says, how do we get the good ideas from around the different projects and not reinvent the wheel, such that if there is a good idea invented in project A, we can industrialize it and roll it out to everybody in the portfolio. So that's the operating model we've got, and it's starting to bear success. And say I was so excited when I was in Bristol earlier, and one of the apprentices said, "Here's what I've done to improve the project," because that's not me doing that. I just set up the environment, but they said, "Look, here I've solved a problem," and the project manager's going, "That's really helpful."
Yeah, it's really interesting that example you gave earlier, Alan, because sometimes as project professionals we get fixated on business cases, and we can take it down to a level that's too granular, and actually just getting on and doing it and demonstrating the value is far more effective. Yeah. Would anyone else like come in? Has anyone got an alternative view to Alan in terms of distributed or centralized?
Not an alternative, Andy. A kind of building on. So I completely agree that the capabilities need to be embedded as part of the project management toolkit, whatever that is. Yeah, it needs to be there, and it needs to be seen as valuable and treated as such, and be part of the team, not someone doing something to the team or throwing stones from afar. I think it's very, very important. But also, just to build on what Eleanor was just talking about, in terms of portfolio control, I do think there's kind of a centralized role of bringing it all together. You've got you're learning from experience, but also you've got, I'm a massive fan of tension in portfolios between the kind of centre and the project to drive that performance, so to create a bit of that healthy kind of challenge as well. So I it's like anything I never see a kind of, there's one way to do this. There's just different varieties of the same thing, but what is absolutely right in terms of what Alan said is these skills aren't something that sits over there in the corner and does some stuff. Yeah, these skills are embedded within the culture and within the dynamics of a project environment, and I think that is absolutely key. And then that stands for a program and for a portfolio as well.
Great, thanks, Graham. So, a question here in terms of we brought you together as public sector, government representatives, if you like. One of the challenges that I think that you have is that data analytics is spread around in terms of it doesn't sit any single place. So you have BAYs playing a role, particularly with BIM mandates and so on. You've got DCMS with the national data strategy, and so it's quite a it sits in different pockets across governments. Obviously, we've got Infrastructure and Projects Authority from a major projects perspective, looking at all of the projects portfolio as well. How do you see? Is there a need for a centralised approach there? It's almost the the equivalent of that centralised versus distributed you're having within your own organisations. Do we need to bring it into even a more central function, or is it still okay to carry on having it in a federated approach, but with some function bringing some of it together? What are your thoughts? How do you bring all your capabilities together? Is probably what I'm asking.
I mean, I personally do think there is more of a role for the Infrastructure and Projects Authority to play here, because as we've shown, we are linked in and connecting up, but we've also got our day jobs. So, we've got to fix the problems in our own organisations. We don't necessarily have time to fix the problems in everyone else's organisations as well. And a good example I'll give is, any senior leader in government is sent off and told, you must use reference class forecasting. But then where's the government reference class forecast database? I mean, that's not a hard thing to create, because we kind of got the data between us, but it's not really going to be ever our day job to kind of pull that together for the whole of government. So I would like to see more of this kind of energy and direction. And I think the Infrastructure and Projects Authority does have this ambition, but equally they've got quite a sort of long list of things to work through. But I think they could do more in terms of setting that broader framework with engagement and support from the rest of government, which would then make it easier for suppliers and make it easier for us as project leaders, because we've all only got so much energy and so many problems we can worry about. So that would be my ask, and I think we've fed that back to them. So that would be my request into the Infrastructure and Projects Authority.
Okay, great. Thanks, Catherine. Any additional thoughts on that?
Andy, is it okay to come in?
Yes, please, Joe.
Yeah, I'm possibly, I get the benefit of some overall sense of direction and some sponsorship and maybe some key enablers. But what I'd be really concerned about is when we tend to start doing these things, we go into a big plan and plan for the plan, and it will never keep up. And I do just wonder if this is, what we're saying about project delivery. My sense is the same applies here. So this is about trust. It's about empowerment. Actually, it's about letting go and changing a lot of the controls that we currently have, letting a lot of them go, and almost letting something more organic develop. And my general sense is, so long as we're all heading for the same target, which has to be the nature and climate emergency, there's nothing more important in our lives. There's nothing more of a threat, I'm afraid. If we're heading towards that through what we do, we're trusted, we're empowered, and we have the tools that we need, I believe we will find the ways. And again, we don't have time for an alternative, I don't believe.
Great, thanks, Joe. So we've got 3 minutes left. So I think that's about 30 seconds each to do a wrap up. So I'll ask each of you, what's your top tip in terms of embracing data analytics for projects? So who do I pick on first? There's a lot of pensive thoughts there. So I'm not going to pick on you. So Graham, you look like you're ready to jump in first.
I wasn't ready, but I will.
No, you should have pulled a different face. I wouldn't have picked on you then.
No, so my top tip, I suppose, is it builds on what we've said collectively. It's not to think of it as a separate thing that we're, is flavour of the month, and it's something that we're going to get on with now, but it'll pass and we'll do something different. Is to embed it in what we do and really embrace it, just in the same way you've embraced it in your own personal life, which most of us have, through everything that we interact with these days. So that's my top thing. And I suppose get involved, get involved in a task force, get involved in groups like this, come and collaborate. Collaboration is the key to all this. I've said it before, Joe said it as well, the power of the collective here. will really drive this forward. Not any of us trying to win the race in this one. It's not a race, it's a combined challenge, and we need to treat it as such. And I'd encourage everybody to see it like that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Graham. So, Alan.
For me, never be afraid to fail, because what I've learned about this data journey is do things, see if they work, and tune them. Don't spend forever building a model and then 6 months later you launch it. Yeah, get something out there. It won't be perfect, but it'll be 80% right, and learn from it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thanks, Alan. And Eleanor.
It's problem solving. It's just problem solving. You know, what do we need to make the best possible decisions? And what tools have we got? And project data analytics is obviously a huge part of that, but it comes back to that. How do we make choices?
Yep, great. Thank you, Eleanor. Katherine.
Well, I might annoy Jo with this, but I think my top tips would be 2 that Jo gave me. So I hope she's got some others up her sleeve. But when I was, sort of struggling with, there's all this amazing stuff out there, but we don't even really know what our projects are. Jo said do both. So you need to get the spreadsheet working out like where your projects are and what they are, because we're not really sure about that. But then also you need to do all the cutting edge stuff as well. So they're kind of world-class cutting edge, sci-fi edge of data analytics stuff too. So do both, do the basics, but do the really future thinking stuff as well.
Great, thank you, Katherine. Jo, last word.
Last word. Yeah, I love what the panel members have said. Everything they've said, I'd say be brave, be bold, and just start. And know that you're not alone. There's all of us here just wanting to help each other. As Graham said, this is all about the greater good. Just an extraordinary community of people who want to help each other on this journey. So don't do it alone. We're all here to help.
Great, thanks, Jo. And one thing I learned from the hackathon and from some of these sessions is that it's easy to fall into the trap to think this is, big and expensive and, overly technical and so on. It's stuff that's just, readily available, probably within your enterprise license. You can just crack on and do it now, as we discovered from the hackathon. So great, thank you very much, all of our panelists. I'm just going to message here that we've had that. They've all done. Yep. No. So I think I'm now going to hand back to Martin just to do a quick close down of the meetup overall. But before I do, can we just give a round of applause to our panelists? And I know that we've got some people still hanging around from our awards ceremony earlier today downstairs. So they're the ones with the drinks and canapes, whereas we're up here without either. So you can probably hear a round of applause from downstairs too. So thank you very much.
It's a superb job. Thank you so much, everybody. So in terms of government people, I've spoken to a lot of government people over the last 5 years, and I think you are the advocates for project data analytics. You understand it, you're driving it, you've got the vision and the passion to make it happen. There is no controlling mind in government who's going to make this happen, right? It's you guys work together, and I think Jo says it's organic. It's about you all sharing ideas, all pushing, and each organisation solving parts of the jigsaw puzzle, as opposed to each organisation working on the same piece in competition. So I think you can accelerate it. I think it's brilliant. It's a pleasure working with you all, and I think we can make a difference. So a massive thanks for giving up your time today. A big thanks to all the people as well who's taking part in Project Hack, and a safe journey back for those people downstairs as well. So thanks for giving up your time. And the next meetup is on the meetup site, so we'll have a look at that. We're still trying to get Dev on board, so Dev's coming back. So Dev Amresha from N-Plan, he comes once a year and tells us what he's up to and tells us some great stuff. So we're trying to line up Dev for the 8th, I think it is 8th of November. We're just trying to nail that, but it's almost there. So thanks again, everybody. I'll see you soon.